For the first time on the African continent, CEOs of foreign mining companies were arrested all on the same day at the same time. The man behind this event is Ibrahim Traoré, the young leader of Burkina Faso. So, how did the bosses of the world's most powerful mining companies get handcuffed in an African country? How did a 50-year exploitation system collapse overnight? Here is the behind-the-scenes story of this world-shaking event. Everything started at 6 a.m. on March 15th in Ouagadougou, the capital of Burkina Faso. 7 mining company CEOs staying in luxury hotels were simultaneously detained by special forces knocking on their doors. Among those arrested were Victor Petro, CEO of Goldmax Corporation, one of the world's largest gold companies; Jean-Claude Dubois, head of Canadian Western Gold Mining; and Michael Thompson, executive of Australian Pacific Resources. This operation was no coincidence. Traoré had been secretly preparing for months. First, he examined all the accounts of mining companies, then worked with international law experts to prepare criminal files. The picture that emerged was horrific. The value of gold extracted from the country over 50 years reached $500 billion, but only $10 billion entered Burkina Faso's treasury. Traoré's team worked secretly for 6 months. Informants were placed at every mining site. Aerial photographs were taken with drones. Satellite images were analyzed. Actual production amounts were determined. Their results were terrifying. Companies were declaring only 1/10 of actual production. Traoré explained the situation like this: gold extracted from our lands with the labor of our people fills European vaults while my people die of hunger. This system is now over. Either you return what you stole or you will rot in prison for life. The arrest moments were dramatic. Goldmax Corporation CEO Victor Petro tried to activate his private security, but Burkina Faso special forces had already taken control of all floors of the hotel. Petro was detained in his pajamas and taken directly to maximum security prison. Western Gold Mining CEO Jean-Claude Dubois was preparing to escape. His private jet was waiting ready at the airport, but Traoré had thought of this too. All airspace was closed, borders were sealed. Dubois was stopped on the way to the airport, and arrested Australian Pacific Resources executive Michael Thompson was caught in the hotel meeting room. He was trying to transfer the company's assets in Burkina Faso to another country. At that very moment, the documents on his computer became evidence court. Red-handed, Traoré had been very careful while planning this operation. First, he had all mining companies' 10-year financial records brought in. Experts examined these records for months. The corruption that emerged was mind-boggling. For example, Goldmax Corporation had extracted $500 million worth of gold from the Taparco gold mine in 2019, but paid only $5 million in taxes to Burkina. How the company was showing 90% of gold production as undeclared while actually extracting 10 tons of gold per day. They were recording only 1 ton. Western Gold Mining was using another method. The company was preparing fake invoices to show the value of extracted gold is low. They were showing kilograms of gold with a market price of $60,000 as sold for $10,000. The difference went directly to the company's offshore accounts. Pacific Resources' method was even more interesting. The company was using even miners' salaries for tax evasion. Salaries paid to workers were shown on paper as 10 times the reality. Thus, the company both got tax deductions and pocketed the difference. Traoré examined their documents one by one and kept each as evidence. But the real bomb was elsewhere. Secret agreements made by mining companies with former government officials came to light. According to those agreements, companies were paying millions of dollars in bribes every year. For instance, in 2015, then Energy Minister Mark Kabor had received $50 million in bribes from Goldmax Corporation. In return, the company's tax rate was reduced from 30% to 3%. This agreement was costing the country $2 billion per year. Western Gold Mining had gone even further. The company had paid $100 million to François Kabor, brother of then-President Roch Kabor, in 2017. In return, they received 3 new gold mining licenses. Thus, mines were right on villagers' agricultural lands. 1,000 people were forcibly displaced. Traoré took action after collecting all these documents. First, he applied to the International Criminal Court. He proved that mining companies had committed crimes against humanity. Charges of forced displacement, child labor, and environmental destruction were accepted. Then, Traore made a surprise move. He froze all mining companies' bank accounts. He seized companies' assets in Burkina Faso. All gold reserves in the mines were taken under state control. These reserves, worth $100 billion, now belong to the people. The arrest news created a bombshell effect. Worldwide, Western media declared Traore a dictator. The European Union was called to emergency meeting. America made threats, but Traore did not back down. "We are applying the law," said Traore. "For 50 years, these companies violated our laws, did not pay their taxes, exploited our people. Now justice is being served. Western threats cannot intimidate us." The people stood behind Traore. Hundreds of thousands poured into the streets in the capital Ouagadougou. People carried banners saying, "Our gold is ours." Villagers living in mining regions were filled with hope. For the first time, 65-year-old mine worker Amadou Sawado spoke in tears. "I've worked in these mines for 40 years. Europe got rich with the gold we extracted, but my children cannot go to school. Finally, there is justice for us." 2. The arrested CEOs were having hard days in Burkina Faso's hot prisons after their luxury lives. Victor Petrov started a hunger strike on the first day, but Trouve was prepared for this too. "Our mine workers work hungry every day. It would be good for you to learn what it feels like," he said. Jean-Claude Dubois offered $1 billion bail through his lawyers. Traore rejected this offer, laughing, "What is $1 billion compared to the $500 billion you stole? Besides, this money is our money anyway." Michael Thompson tried to fake illness. He said he had a heart attack, but doctors sent by Traore found no health problems. Thompson's lie became evidence against him in court. Among others arrested were Robert Mackenzie from Continental Gold, James Harrison from African Minerals, Peter Williams from Global Mining Co-op, and David Anderson from Summit Resources. Each one's story was worse than the other. Mackenzie was accused of forcibly displacing villagers, Harrison of employing child labor, Williams of environmental destruction, and Anderson of collaborating with armed groups. The trial process began when the whole world was watching. Burkina Faso. Traore had established a special court. This court, consisting of 3 African, 2 Asian, and 2 Latin American judges, attracted attention with its impartiality. At the first hearing, the prosecutor read the charges one by one. A separate file was prepared for each CEO. 234 separate charges were directed at Goldmax Corporation CEO, Petro, tax evasion, bribery, environmental destruction, forced displacement, and more Western gold mining. CEO Dubois had 189 charges. The most serious was employing child labor. It was proven that 12-year-old children were working in the company's mines. Thus, children stayed underground 16 hours a day, and most died from lung disease. The most serious charge against Pacific Resources. Executive Thompson was polluting water sources with cyanide. The cyanide used by the company had poisoned 3 rivers. Cancer cases had increased tenfold in 17 villages. More than 2,000 people had lost their lives. The stories of victims heard as witnesses in court broke hearts. Musa Orahugo, who started working in the Minute age 8 and now at 23, a lung patient, spoke in tears. "They stole my childhood. They stole my health. They stole my life." 70-year-old Mariam Cow, whose village was forcibly evacuated, said our ancestors' graves were on those lands. Our home was there. They destroyed everything for gold. The compensation given to us was $100. The value of gold from those lands is billions of dollars. Traore was calm but determined throughout the trial. He came to court every day to follow the cases. In his statement to journalists, this is not just Burkina Faso's case. It is all of Africa's case. If we can succeed, other countries will be encouraged. He said indeed, Traore's move created a domino effect. In Mali, Imigoa began investigating foreign mining companies. In Guinea, Madi Doya took similar steps. In Niger, Abdulrahman Chiani canceled mining agreements. Western companies were in panic. Share values crashed. Goldmax Corporation shares lost 70% value. Western gold mining came to the brink of bankruptcy. Pacific Resources had to stop all operations in Africa. Crisis meetings were held in European capitals. French President Macron threatened Traoré. "You'll pay the price for what you have done. You, cannot touch our investors." But Traoré's answer was clear. "Say colonizers, not investors. We also want real investors, but we don't want thieves." U.S. President Biden threatened sanctions. He said he would cut aid to Burkina Faso. Traoré replied laughing. "Which aid? The $100 million you give per year. We will earn $10 billion per year just from our gold mines. Give your aid to other puppet countries." Meanwhile, evidence was being presented one by one in court. Correspondence from and in companies' computers was shocking. Goldmax Corporation executives were insulting the people of Burkina Faso among themselves as stupid natives. "We make them do whatever we want with a few $1 million in bribes," they wrote in emails. Western Gold Mining's internal correspondence was even worse. Company executives were using the term cheap labor for child workers. Instead of giving $100 to one adult worker, we give $10 each to 10 children. And they never make a sound, wrote CEO Dubois. Pacific Resources had written detailed plans to dump cyanide waste into rivers. No one will notice. Anyway, these people's lives are short. Even if they die from cancer, they can't blame us, said company reports. Continental Golds. Mackenzie was describing the oppression of villagers as necessary sacrifice, African minerals. Harrison was saying acceptable laws for workers dying in mines, global mining, corpse. Williams was dismissing environmental disaster as nature renewing itself. Traoré trembled with anger while reading thus documents but kept his composure. "You see what they think of us, but the game is over now. Justice will be served," he said. In the 6th month of the trial, the verdict was announced. All CEOs were found guilty. Victor Petrov was sentenced to 50 years in prison and $10 billion in fines. Jean-Claude Dubois received 45 years in prison and $8 billion in fines. Michael Thompson was sentenced to life imprisonment for environmental destruction. Robert Mackenzie received 40 years in prison for forced displacement. James Harrison was sentenced to 55 years for employing child labor. Peter Williams was given 60 years for environmental destruction and causing mass deaths. David Anderson was sentenced to life imprisonment for financing armed groups. There was another interesting detail in the court decision. All CEOs' assets were confiscated. Luxury yachts, villas, private jets, art collections, all was seized. The income from selling these assets would be distributed to victim families. Traore case made a historic speech after the court decision. "Today, we did not just try 7 CEOs, but a 500-year colonial system, and we won. Now, our new era begins in Africa. Our people who are the real owners of our resources will get rich." But Traoré did not stop there. He seized all assets of mining companies. He established the Burkina Faso National Mining Company. Now all mines were under state control. 70% of the income would be spent on education, health, and infrastructure. The first results were seen immediately. Hospitals and schools began to be built in mining regions. Workers' salaries increased tenfold. Child labor was completely banned. Modern safety measures were taken in mines. The people declared Traore a hero. Songs were sung in the streets. Traore took back our gold. Traore is the people's man. Festivals were organized in villages. People were looking to the future with hope for the first time. Although Western media tried to portray Traore as a dictator, the facts were clear. Burkina Faso's economy was growing rapidly. Unemployment was decreasing. Poverty rate was falling. A revolution was happening in education and health. The numbers were impressive. In the first year after nationalization of mining revenues, Burkina Faso's national income increased by 300%. $500, new schools, 200 hospitals. 5,000 kilometers of paved roads were built. Electricity was brought to 2,000 villages without electricity. Clean water was provided to 3 million people without access to clean water. The lives of mine workers changed completely. Minimum wage increased from $50 to $500. All workers were covered by health insurance. Work safety standards were brought to European level. The number of fatal accidents in mines dropped to 0. The revolution in education was even more impressive. Technical universities were established in every mining region. Young people could now become mining engineers, geologists, chemists without going abroad. 10,000 students were studying at these universities with scholarships. Other African countries also followed. Traore Part 5, mining CEOs were arrested in Mali. Bauxite companies were nationalized. In Guinea, uranium mines were taken under state control, and Niger. Africa had now awakened. Traore has said in a speech, "We are not enemies to anyone. Our door is open to everyone who wants to do fair trade. The era of exploitation is over. Africa's resources belong to African people." It's that simple. While Aristide CEOs rotted in prison, their companies went bankrupt. Goldmax Corporation completely collapsed. Western Gold Mining was bought by a small company. Pacific Resources was broken up and sold. Trout's move went down in history. For the first time, an African leader had stood so firmly against Western companies and won. Nothing would be the same anymore. The people of Burkina Faso are finally benefiting from their own resources. Gold revenues were being spent on building schools, hospitals, roads. Children were spending time in schools, not in mines. Workers were receiving wages to live humanely. Traorist struggle inspired all oppressed peoples. Similar movements began in Latin America and Asia. Around the world, peoples began to claim their own resources, and Traore was proven right. Justice found its place. Sooner or later, the exploitation system collapsed. Africa stood up. No one would be able to steal Africa's resources anymore because there were leaders like Traore, because the people had awakened, because everything had changed. Now this story does not end here. Traore's struggle continues. He takes new steps every day. He liberates Africa a little more every day. And one day all of Africa will be truly free. Its resources will belong to its own people. That day is not far away, because Traore showed the way. The rest is up to courageous leaders and conscious peoples. This is Traore's story. Not the story of one man, but the awakening story of a continent. The story of resistance against exploitation. The story of justice's victory. And this story is just beginning.